Hello again, and welcome to Cal TV, sponsored by Calvary Robotics. My name is Gemma. As promised, episode number 2 in the mini-series with Rich Sheridan, famous author of Joy Inc. and the CEO of Menlo Innovations. We had a great conversation in the first part of the mini-series. I know you'll enjoy this one just as much. In this one, we'll explore a little bit more about workforce flexibility, and empowering people to be the best they can be. So stay tuned. Here we go. Thank you. And thanks again, Rich, for being part of this.
There's another thing I wanted to explore with you here, because workplace flexibility, it's another important topic in your book, and but not necessarily maybe in the way people might understand it. But as we see, generational changes in the way and expectations. Maybe you could highlight a little bit about what that means for you and the benefits you've seen of how you look at workplace flexibility.
I remember reading in my earliest days, like back in the early 80s, long before any of these experiments, a book by Peter Drucker on management, tasks, and responsibilities. And big, thick books, like 800 pages. And I, for whatever reason, at that point in my life, I was so ready. It was a page turner for me.
And you read the whole book. Good for you.
I read the whole darn book. And, and Drucker just was always filled with just amazing thoughts and ideas. He's so ahead of his time. But the lesson I took out of that book was that management needs a flexible workforce. Over and over again, he just said it in so many different ways, and it made so much sense to me. Well, let me tell you, the software industry, anything but flexible. The way we hire, I need an Oracle 9.1.1.3 Service Pack 2 expert. Well, I only know Service Pack 1. Oh, I'm sorry, we need you to hit the ground running. It's like, we're not going to pay for you learning on our dime. We are going to take advantage of everything you learned today. It's like, you're not going to build a flexible team with that kind of approach to HR, that kind of approach to hiring. And everybody in my industry, Joe, I don't know if you probably have the same thing where you are. They're always like, we can't find good people. Like, seriously, they're everywhere. You can find good people. You're just looking the wrong way. You're looking through the wrong lens. Stop doing that. So because we pair and switch the pairs every 5 days, everybody's learning all the time. And learning begets flexibility, right? Because now I have, I can see Joe over my shoulder here behind me. Joe's been with us for about 8 years. I can put Joe on any project, in any technology, in any domain, on any given day, and he's ready. Why? Because we've been preparing him for that flexibility for 8 years, because we never let him sit still. We never let him stay in the same place for too long. And so Joe's constantly in learning mode. Well, let me tell you, when you're constantly in learning mode, guess what? You're learning all the time. You actually enjoy it. You thrive on it. You expect it. It's like a hunger inside of you. And so that part of our flexibility is important. The space itself is flexible. We have pull downs from the ceiling. We have lightweight aluminum tables. We tell the team, put the tables however you choose. We don't care. There's no space police. There's no authority. There's no committee that needs to write a policy on how the table. No. Team just changes the space however they choose. And the interesting thing about changing physical space, and this is important, you and I probably have this experience once a week. You ever been in the kitchen, walked out to the garage with something on your mind, you get out there and you're like, why am I here? What was I coming to get? And then you go back into the kitchen and you're like, oh, now I remember. And then you go out in the garage and you get it. Well, this is really an important construct in human beings. Our thought process is literally guided by the physical space we're in. There's been studies done. When you walk through a door, it changes your thinking, right? That's why you forget when you go out to the garage. Well, imagine every single day in a 20-year career, you drive down, you get up out of bed, you go through the Groundhog Day routine, you're getting ready for work. You get in your car, you drive down the same road, you park in the same parking spot, you walk down the same hall, take the same elevator to the same floor, walk down the same corridor, sit in the same cube where you've always sat, and your boss comes in and says, I need you to think new thoughts today. I need you to be innovative. What are the odds that you'll be innovative if every frame in your head is exactly the same for 20 years, right? Here, it's changing constantly. Sometimes we just change just for change's sake. We'll just mix the whole place up. And that constantly is putting people in a new frame of mind, and they're thinking new thoughts, which is what we need from our teams, right? The old thoughts aren't going to keep us here anymore.
Yeah, I'd say reading the book and our discussions, one of the mantras is challenge the status quo all the time.
Yep.
On this topic of flexibility and something else you touched on in the book, it also allows for scalability. And typically we talk about scalability, we talk about it in expansion strategies. But you also mentioned it gives you some ability in a slowdown. I'd like to explore what does that mean? How do you manage that scalability in the opposite direction?
Yeah. So every time anybody says the word scale, it's always scale up, right? You might as well just put the word up there. Everybody says, oh, does this thing scale? Well, they really mean, does it scale up? And our system does, and I can talk about that. But then I challenge you. I'm like, no, scaling down is way harder. And they're like, what do you mean scaling down is hard? Well, let's say you compose your team out of 4 towers of knowledge. One's the database guru, one's the secret sauce expert, one's the front end person, one's the UX designer. And that's your team, right? And they're cranking along and supposedly they're in flow and all that kind of stuff. And then somebody says, hey, we don't need as much anymore on that project. We need to move 2 people off to the other. Well, which 2 are you going to grab? Can't grab the database guy, there's still database stuff. Can't grab the secret sauce guy, he's the only one who knows it. Can't grab the front end person, they're the only one who understands how that part of it works. And so you can't scale down. So this team gets stuck in place. And heaven forbid if one of them decides to quit and go get another job, then you're totally screwed. But in our system, because the knowledge is being shared and everybody is going to learn all pieces of it, if we go from 4 people down to 2, everybody still has the knowledge. The team's going slower, which is what you wanted in the first place. You didn't have as much work to do, so we don't need as much effort. And those other 2 people go off to learn on some other project, and they're helping that project scale up. And why are they ready to hit the ground running the way everybody wants them to? Because they've been practicing this onboarding thing every single week for the last 8 years in Joe's case. Every week he switches pairs, he maybe switches projects, that sort of thing. So he's constantly in this state of, I got to learn new things. I got to learn how to extract the information from my pair partner. I have to learn to bring myself up to speed. All of those things connote an ability to scale up and an ability to scale down, which I think is the essence of flexibility.
And engaging for the employees, for sure. I can see that be just, it make it exciting in itself. And you touched on another point that I want to discuss here, and actually a little bit earlier on this towers of knowledge idea. And certainly in my career, I've seen that type of situation, the towers of knowledge and the pitfalls that perhaps it creates both for the company, but even for the individual. And maybe for my listeners, kind of at least discuss your perspective of why that is and how it becomes a pitfall. And again, maybe I'm putting a prejudice negative against it, but I do think it's a negative situation as you do.
Well, look, a tower of knowledge feels like a great place to be. And I will tell you, there was a long time in my career where I tried to become a tower of knowledge because it feels like job security. Until one day you wake up and you realize it becomes a prison from which you cannot escape, right? Where you look down and there's a shackle around your ankle and it's bolted into the wall, and you're in this tower. Let's say you're in the right now, popularly, everybody's trying to figure out how they get their Fox Pro database applications, which was outmoded by about 20 years ago. But everybody's still running stuff on Fox Pro, and they're like, how do we get to, some new technology? How do we get out of Fox Pro and get into the latest and greatest, right? Well, let's say the Fox Pro expert you have in your team, who's been that expert for the last 20 years and is the tower of knowledge, wakes up one day and says, hey, I want to work on the new stuff. And the boss says, oh, no, we have way too much Fox Pro work still to do. And all of a sudden he's like, well, I don't want to do Fox Pro anymore. Well, that's what we pay you to do. And he's like, well, then I quit. And the boss says, well, we're not going to let you quit. We're going to give you $50,000 more a year, right? Which, believe me, is not unusual in our industry to do something like that. And so you push this big pile of money over to Bill, the Fox Pro expert, right? And Bill goes home that night and says, honey, I'm really unhappy at work. And I'm thinking of quitting. Now, I told him I was going to quit. She's like, what? Well, don't worry. They gave me $50,000 more, $4,000 more a month. She's like, Bill, that's wonderful. Oh my gosh, we can finally start saving for college for our kids. And he's like, oh, so you think I should stay and take the money? She's like, of course you should stay and take the money. I mean, this is what we've been waiting for. Congratulations. And so he goes back to work the next day, kind of a little bit buoyed up because he got that big raise. And it lasts for about a day. And he hears everybody talking about the new projects, the new technologies, the new way of working. And he keeps going down the same corridor to sit in the same office to work on the same thing he's done for 20 years. But now he's trapped. Because now he's priced out of the market with skills that aren't useful to anybody else except other people who need Fox Pro experts, and that's not what he wants to do. And he gets bitter. He gets angry. He becomes that cantankerous programmer in the corner that everybody don't go talk to Bill today. He's in a mood. You know how Bill gets. Well, let me tell you why Bill got the way Bill got. Because Bill got trapped in his tower of knowledge. And now he's in this midlife crisis that he cannot escape. Becomes a surly dad, a surly husband, a surly neighbor, a surly programmer. And everybody wondered, what happened to Bill? Well, I'll tell you what happened to Bill. Bill got trapped and eventually became a prison he couldn't escape from. And people do not trap well. Humans do not trap well.
Yeah, I'm sure I've been in meetings where it said, why don't we promote this person to this position? And somebody will say, oh, no, but he's way too good at what he does or she does. And, we can't afford to lose him in that. Why would you ever hold somebody back because they're doing a good job? I just never really
every single day.
But it does. Now I gotta add, so as I said, I've been a disciple here. You've converted me, so to speak, and I've talked about you in the book around the team. And some of my team members actually have picked up the book, read the book, and one of them, knowing I was going to be talking to you today, he gave me a question. Yes, he obviously read the book, and he, in his role in the business, he's taking it from that perspective at least today. And he asked me, can you ask Rich, do you think sales and marketing or similar fields would benefit from having a position similar to the high-tech anthropologist? And you touched on that a little bit about explaining what they are. So if you would, maybe from your perspective, you could offer some insight to his question, because I'm sure he'll be listening in. So like you had an example, I think, in the book about the Transportation Authority and how that got impacted because of the high-tech anthropologist. So from his context, do you think that there could be a benefit for that?
There's two, especially in the engineering world, I will simply say that too often, I will self-face here, especially as a dad of 3 daughters. I'm Mr. Fix-It. I'm going to, you just give me a hint of a problem and I'm going to present a solution in no time flat, right? I got the answer for you. Like, Dad, you haven't even heard the question. I mean, oh, no, I know what you need to do. Like, really, Dad, could you just listen once? And how much of sales, true sales, is actually listening and empathizing and understanding and co-creating a solution with your customer rather than just trying to sell them something that you thought was perfectly designed for them. The best salespeople, the best marketing people are the people who truly try to understand the people they're trying to serve and figuring out what would delight look like for them. And so this idea of high-tech anthropology absolutely applies to sales. It probably applies to sales more than it does to product design and development. Because the only way we actually get to sell things that matter to people, which is what we really want to do as humans, we want to delight people we intend to serve. And the way we do that is by listening and understanding what they need, not what we thought was the perfect solution. But we might find out that there's another different opportunity because we went in with ears rather than our mouth.
Yeah, I know you probably have heard me say, but one of the things I like to tell, and I see it too often, that people listen to reply rather than listen to understand. It's one of my favorite quotes. And as you say, if you're listening to understand, then you're really being that high-tech anthropologist from the
and we pair our anthropologists as well, Joe. And I will tell you that I would run some experiments with your sales team by pairing them, because look, I think it's a natural human thing. When you're listening and you're in a conversation, you're trying, what am I saying next? I don't want to have a stupid pregnant pause. You have a peer partner there who can truly just listen, maybe write some notes down, and then respond at their point where they're ready with some insight based on what they heard. And then the role can switch. Now the conversation's with the other person while the first person is now spending more time listening, because it's hard in a one-on-one conversation to simply, be active listening while I'm also in a conversation with you.
Yep, yeah, I like the idea, and I certainly, in my role, I'll travel with the team, and I think that exactly does happen. That there might be saying, I'll write down some notes and some other discussion. They'll write down some notes, and we could compare afterwards. So I can see where that would work in a parallel there too. Now I'm going to go back to corporate America a little bit, because you came from, parentheses, what corporate America. You have a history there, like many of our listeners, certainly myself, and understand that the typical kind of thing we more often than not call action item lists. But you've got a different approach there. You call it the story card system, if I got that correct. How do you see that different or similar?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of times people think empowerment and autonomy and those kind of concepts are, we just need to let our team figure out what to do without any system of work. So people, typically at work, people in the corporate world are living in a sea of ambiguity. They have no idea what their priorities are. They have too much to do. I mean, let's face it. Most management systems are, I'm going to overload you. I'm going to overload my team to 130%. That way I know they're being productive, right? And of course, what they don't know is what's the highest priority? What should I work on first? What sense do I have that I actually did a good job, that I got something actually meaningful done? In our system of work, which involves a work capture system, a work estimation system, a work planning system, and a work authorization system, what's beautiful about that, overlaid on top of a system where we know exactly how many people we need in each project, who they're going to be, and who's going to pair with them. When our team walks in on Monday morning, absolute clarity. Which project am I in? Who am I paired with? What's our work plan for the week? Did I have a say in how much time I need? Absolutely. And now we work on one thing at a time, and we work on it till it's done. Now, we might get stuck and we have to go on to the second thing and have somebody help us get unstuck. That's a natural part of work. But there's this queued up thing. We work on one thing at a time, no multitasking. Human beings cannot multitask. It is not physically possible. Now, my wife will correct me. It should say, Rich, male human beings cannot multitask, right? So I'll buy into that. I've seen her do it effectively. But the fact matter is, we don't do well when we're trying to spin plates all the time, right? One plate crashes and all of the other plates crash within seconds because we're all focused on the plate that crashed. What if we could give our team a chance through a simple, repeatable, measurable, visible system of work to actually go to work and get meaningful things actually done?
Yeah, I'm sure as my listeners, and certainly some of my team members will listen in later or listening now, will say, Joe, you're guilty of that sometimes, and I'm sure I am. So I'll have to work on that. Thanks.
Well, what a great conversation and insightful input from Rich. Thank you for that, Rich. Now, stay tuned for episode 3, and that one will explore a little bit more about finding the right people for your organization and also explore how the pandemic has affected how we work and how it will have a lasting effect on business in general. Again, thank you all for tuning in to Cal TV, sponsored by Calvary Robotics, and thank you especially to Rich Sheridan, CEO of Menlo Innovations.